Hi, and welcome back to part 3 of our series about new directions in the bar exam, or it could be subtitled, Why Everyone in the Industry is Going to Hate Me When We're Done. In part 1, I looked at the coming tsunami, I described it, of the bar exam, difficulty in, or more difficult grading coming, lower passage rates, pressures from the economy, pressures from the bar examiners generally. It's a fairly bleak picture, frankly. In part 2, I looked at the first level of defense that I think a lot of people would rely on, and that's law school bar preparation courses. And my conclusion is that they're not very helpful. In fact, they may be part of the problem because they're simply not well designed, they're not personalized, they're not focused on the exams, and frankly, they're generally not taught by people that know much about the bar to begin with. Well, some of you may have watched those first 2 videos and confidently thought to yourselves, well, it's all well and good, but I'm signed up for, insert the name of the giant bar review course that you want, and they're going to help me prepare because, by golly, they've been around forever, or they've been around for a year, and they're big, and because they're big, that must mean they're good. Well, this is the one that's probably going to get in the biggest trouble but today I want to look at the role of the giant bar review courses because I think that they are highly culpable for what's going on right now. Now, in order to understand this, I think you need to understand a little bit about the economics of this industry. Not because you care, but because it affects the way that teaching occurs. The best teaching, I think most teachers would agree, is individualized instruction. And I think most people would agree, and certainly the National Conference of Bar Examiners, the people that write these tests, they absolutely agree that more focus on writing is absolutely called for. Now, here's the problem. That's very expensive kinds of training to provide. It's time intensive, it's labor intensive. It requires someone who not only understands the bar exam, but knows how to teach the bar exam. And while you might think that's not so difficult, I want you to think back to some of your best law school professors and ask yourself, were they better teachers or better academics? The truth is, most people that are good in law are academic more than they are teachers. Most of you probably had the experience of the fabulously intelligent professor who talked to the blackboard or the whiteboard or the computer equivalent rather than to the class. That's not unusual at all, and it has an impact when it comes to the bar. Now, the economics of a bar review work like this. You make the most amount of money when you put the most number of people in seats for the shortest period of time, and you give them the most uniform, non-customized courses that you can. Now, what that translated to for many years was this idea of having big lecture halls, and you simply rotate professors through on a traveling circuit, and they would read a script and not take questions, and then move on to the next city or the next location and give the same script again. In order to make that work with law school schedules, you did it in typically a 6-week pattern right before the exam and right after graduation. And it's a highly profitable program. If you don't believe me, check out the stock information on Thomson Reuters, which is the owner of Barbary, or on Kaplan and the Washington Post. When you see those companies, you realize that they can be very profitable because they put a lot of bodies in a lot of seats for a short period of time, and they don't have to provide much in the way of individualized instruction. Now, as technology has come along, it's easier even still. You don't need to actually have the live body. Now you put all those seats in the room and you throw up a DVD of the lecturer being given some other remote location and time. Well, that all sounds very good, and it is wonderful if you're the owner of a big bar review. However, it is really, really bad teaching. And I think, frankly, if you got most of the people in this industry together and you gave them a couple of stiff drinks of their favorite libation, they would be pretty willing to tell you that it's not the best way to teach. It's just simply the structure that they have labored under for so many years. Now, as a result, what that means is that you get an awful lot of people, in fact, the vast majority, who take the bar exams, who sit in these classes absolutely bewildered. The pacing doesn't suit their particular needs. There's no opportunity to ask questions unless you want to turn to the lost neurotic soul on your left or the lost neurotic soul on your right and say, what was that all about? There's almost no feedback on your work. And indeed, many of these courses simply tell you, learn the law, memorize the law, recite the law. And you might say, well, that must be because that's what it takes. No, it goes back to the economics. It's much easier and it's much more effective to put the burden back on the student to, quote, learn the law, and in that way you don't have the responsibility as a teacher to actually provide any meaningful feedback. In other words, it's a delivery information system rather than a teaching system. Now, I think that this distinction is absolutely critical because in a time when the bar exam is getting harder and the grading's getting more intense, simply delivering the same information that you have delivered for the last 25 or 30 years. And by the way, if you don't think that's so, here's another secret about our industry. All that changes is the color of the cover of the books. The material is virtually identical to the first editions. Virtually nothing changes. And you might say, oh, but the lectures must be all different. I hate to burst your bubble, but these professors have been reading the same lectures verbatim for years. All that's done is they're re-recorded to change reflecting hairstyles and clothing styles. The point is that this is an information delivery network that you're in a large bar review course. In fact, some of those bar review courses are still using teaching methods that were developed in the 60s and 70s, even though there's wildly contradictory information today about how people learn that tells us that memorizing and mnemonics and writing everything down by hand and going through fill in the blanks is some of the most ineffective ways to learn that we know of. You see, the industry has not kept pace with what we know about teaching. There are so many more effective ways to teach today, and there's so much more effective technology to make that happen, and yet the economics of the industry have kept the large bar reviews, the courses that probably 90% of the bar takers sign up for, have been kept in the dark. Now, that hasn't been a problem as long as the general passing rate for that 90% hovered around 50, 60, 70%. In other words, most people would say, nah, it's not great, but I'm smarter than the average person. If I do what I'm supposed to do in that course, I've got a 50, 60, 70% chance of passing. That's pretty good. But notice what's happened. As California, I think, has taken the leading edge here with their 33% pass rate, that in effect is a 33% pass rate for the large mega bar reviews. Now, smaller courses like ours outperformed that number dramatically, doubled it. The point is that we were able to exceed it. Why couldn't the big bar reviews? And the answer is they're like big ships. They simply cannot turn quickly. They cannot change their pedagogy overnight. They can't change the way that they teach writing overnight. They're too heavily invested. Too many professors in too many locations who are reading too many old scripts to change what they're doing. So they continue to offer the same tired course. And the truth is, if you're in law school right now and you've got a parent that took the bar exam 20, 30 years ago, I promise you their notes would virtually work unchanged for your notes today if you're in a large bar review. That's how little it's changed. And as a result, they're not preparing students for the exams that they're getting, nor are they preparing them for the grading or the criteria that they're beginning to see. That's why it's absolutely critical that bar takers take their own responsibility for learning and adapting to what the exam is. Now, in the next series, I'll talk about how I think a bar taker can do that. And the choices obviously are things like choosing a different bar review, but also within the large bar review, some things that you can do that will help you. But the point that I think absolutely is critical here is that the large bar reviews are so heavily invested in doing the same thing that they are literally missing the change that's going on right under their noses. And the sad part of that is that as they miss those changes, their students who have paid them thousands of dollars are simply getting outdated information, useless information when it comes to test taking, and in fact are going into the exam, frankly, like lambs to the slaughter with no idea of what's happening, and then they're stunned when they get their results that say they failed. That's not a result that has to happen. And if you're one of those people that went through an exam in a state in the last couple of years, did everything your large mega bar review told you to do, and failed the exam, there's a reason for it, and hopefully this has helped give you some insight. Stay with me for the next part of this series and we'll talk about exactly what you can do as a bar taker to prepare. Thanks very much.